I'm Michael. That's David. You will confuse us. You will call me David and him Michael. Actually, David goes out of his way to introduce himself as Michael. Then he'll ask you for money and insult you. So just be wary of his little tricks, okay? Let's see if this thing works. That's us. There's Lubisa. She couldn't be here today. That's where we all want to be, on a beach, somewhere, tropical. Maybe Jamaica this year. Maybe Jamaica next year. How do we get there? Educate yourself, protect yourself at all times, and save and make money. And we're going to talk to you about all three. First website. You guys have cell phones? These things called cell phones? I mean, no? Can you whip them out? Can you go on that website there? Just bookmark that, because that's going to help you get educated. There's something like 450 articles that we've written, and we write every single week about a legal topic, a practice management topic. There's videos, there's articles, there's tons of free information on there. That's what you want to do? David, you want to? That's what it looks like, right? Anything to add?
Nope, exactly that.
That's what it looks like. Great. Bookmark it, dentistlawyers.ca. Okay. David, you want to tell them about the ebook?
Ebook. So we wrote a book on Ontario dental law. You have trouble sleeping? Read it. You want to hear fascinating stories about your colleagues? Read it. You want to understand how to get educated, protect yourself, save and make money? Read it.
How often do we update this ebook?
A couple times a year.
Yeah, it's now 274 pages.
Who's planning on reading the ebook right away? All right, I saw your
Wow.
hand. Not hard to win a prize today, folks. Not hard.
Those are some of our articles. I write for two magazines. One is called Ontario Dentist. The other one's called Oral Health Office. So from time to time, you may see an article. You can download everything for free. Some are more controversial than others. And then travel and learn. I mean, this is a great opportunity. I tell people that my wife is still with me because I take her to these nice places, and I'm pretty sure that's the reason your wife is still with you. Yeah?
The only reason.
Yeah. So we kind of do these presentations on cruises and nice resorts. Dentist Legal Forms is another website we created. It allows dentists to create legal forms at about a third of the cost. You guys kind of input the information yourself, and that's what it looks like, and it spits out a document that's pretty damn good. We've got some samples here we'll show you of some wills and letters of intent. Yep. You didn't get a book. We'll get you one.
Duncan has one for you.
Okay. You guys have heard about wills. I know it's not the best thing to talk about. However, you can make wills on this website. Pretty nifty, eh? Actually, you know what? These are my wills. So a primary and secondary will, for those dentists who eventually incorporate, you're going to want to save taxes. You're going to want to control the system of who gets what. So you're going to have a corporate will and a non-corporate will. Those are my wills. You can read through them. Please don't sign them. They're unsigned. No, I'm not going to give you anything unless you want my debts. It's all good. Those are wills. And that's us. And all of our online legal forms comes with lawyer review. Associate agreements. Dun, dun, dun. What we decided to do was bring you some sample associate agreements. David's my Vanna White today, by the way. Here.
I'm getting exercise.
These are typical associate agreements that you may be asked to sign. You're going to see a lot of things in there. You may not understand everything, but this is what they could look like, right? So take your time, take a look. They're fictional. We didn't use real names. So here are the things about associate agreements that you probably want to know more about. Do you need to sign one? Can you start working without having signed an associate agreement? What do you guys think?
Yes.
Who said no? Good.
You don't win a prize.
Typically, now this whole 40-60 split, is that standard in and outside the GTA, in and outside of London? What do you guys think? Is that it?
No.
What have you guys heard? It could be lower?
In the GTA.
In the GTA, it could be lower.
Fast answer.
Interesting. What do you guys think? Could it be lower than 40?
Yes.
Could it be higher than 40?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to say in all of the associate agreements I've drafted, I don't know, Ken, you might want to chirp in on this one. We've seen it range from 40 to 50. Okay, we've rarely, if ever, seen it below 40. Ken, anything?
Correct. In fact, the range of 45 is the common one I'm seeing now.
Mm-hmm.
And on the high end, guys, I don't know if it's the same for you, is usually in the high end of 50, as high as 55 was where the principal dentist was disabled for a period of time. So the associate actually stepped up and took over the management of the practice for a while.
So what Ken has really just said in a lot of words is, it depends.
Thanks, David.
Option to buy in. You guys are probably thinking, well, I'm going to associate here. I want the option to buy your practice. David, isn't that what every associate wants?
Correct.
How often do they get that in the agreement?
Not always, if never.
Never. Never. And Ken, have you seen it?
A couple of times, but it's not.
It's rare.
Rare.
The associate has to have a lot of leverage to ask for it. You've got to have the cojones. Terminating the agreement. David, how can an associate agreement be terminated?
It depends on what the contract says. If there's a contract, and if there's no contract, it depends.
Okay, give us some examples.
Sadly, since we've had the conversation today about succession, death could end a contract.
Mm-hmm. What about the whole idea of notice? How does that work?
Yep, there can be notice. There can be a provision within the contract that says, if I wish to terminate the relationship, I will give you X number of weeks, months, days notice.
And does the principal get that? Does the associate get that right? Who gets it?
It depends.
On what?
What's written in the contract, if there's a contract.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Maybe you should give yourself a prize for grilling us. Okay. Also, there's this thing called just cause termination. What's that all about, David?
So if you're doing the example of fraud and you're embezzling from the front desk, likely you're going to be terminated, and there will be no reason for any sort of notice or compensation because there's just cause to terminate you.
Okay.
Also, don't hit the patients.
Don't hit the patients. Don't sleep with your team members. There's typically a big list. You can see it in the associate agreements. This constitutes just cause. Being found guilty of a criminal offense, losing your license, being disrespectful, hitting people, abusive, things like that. Breaches and penalties. You guys will probably receive associate agreements. The breaches and penalties aren't in the examples that we gave you, but we see them all the time. Can you see them? What kind of crazy penalties do we see, David?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah.
Okay, so for example, if you happen to treat a patient at another office for any reason, you might have to pay the principal $50,000. That was probably the craziest one I think I ever saw.
Yep. If you set up shop across the street, you have to pay $100,000 within a certain time frame. There's something called a chart fee.
Yep.
What's a chart fee?
Essentially, if a principal bleeds patients to the associate leaves, they may want X dollars per chart that walks out of the office and gets transferred to wherever you go or where you are.
So you may pay $600 for a patient that left and you treated them, with or without soliciting. So be very careful when you start seeing, penalties. Just look for the dollar sign, right? There should only be really one place where the dollar sign comes into place. That's remuneration. If you keep seeing it, $100,000, $50,000 penalties, be mindful. Okay, and are restrictive covenants legal? Now, you guys remember what restrictive covenants are? Yeah? We got some nods in the back. What are restrictive covenants, sir? Blue shirt.
Indicating that you're not allowed to practice something
Right.
It's
Good.
like a never-ending pocket.
Now, are those legal? Well, let's have a discussion about that, okay? Are non-solicits legal? The question is, if there is a contract, the contract would govern. If there is no contract, you have a verbal agreement, because everyone said, yeah, you can still work without a contract, right? So then the question becomes, can you solicit if there's no contract in place? So let's answer that question, shall we? And then there's another article here about are non-competes legal. Here it is. If you're an associate without a contract, can you set up shop across the street, take some copies of patient lists and records with you, take staff with you, and advertise generally? No contract. Keep that in mind. Can you do these things?
No.
Okay, in the back. You're saying, yes, you can. Of course you can.
It's not cool.
You can do it, right? You guys went to school for all those years, paid all that money. This is your livelihood. Why shouldn't you? There's no contract saying otherwise, right? So, all these court cases, right? The judges have said, if you, as the associate, are the exclusive provider of dental services, when you leave, keep in mind there's no contract. You're entitled to take copies of patient records. You can set up shop across the street, can. Staff or team members, as we like to call them, can leave, assuming they give proper notice. And you can advertise generally. Okay? Cool?
So you were correct.
Here's the other question. Okay, so that's without a contract. What if there's a contract? Can you still do those things? Who said that? David?
I just want to be in front of the camera.
It depends on what the contract says, right? So pay careful attention to the wording of the contract. Okay. When your associate leaves, this is an article that I wrote, published in Ontario Dentist, that describes those cases and the law concerning if there is no contract, right? A principal's obligations when an associate leaves. This is under the professional conduct guidelines, or misconduct guidelines. And it basically says, okay, you've left, principal's all pissed off. What's the principal's obligations to a patient who asks about where you are? That's it. It's right there. Yep, in the orange shirt. You had a question? Okay. Anything to add, David?
No, that sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Fantastic. Associate agreement tips. David, you want to go through these?
All right, so number one, you would prefer to look like an independent contractor as opposed to an employee. And you heard some of the reasons why from Ken's presentation, why there's tax advantages to that.
How often do we see associates as employees, David?
Rare, very rare.
Have you ever seen?
I have none.
Yeah.
None. Zero.
Associates might want to be, but they never end up being.
And part of the reason for that is?
The principal doesn't want them to be. Because there's added costs with having, as an employer, there's additional costs to having employees versus having independent contractors. And again, that flows back into the earlier presentation.
Right. Next point. Reasonable non-competes, non-solicits.
Yep.
Now, non-competes. Okay, we talked about non-solicits. We talked about competing when there's no contract. If your associate agreement says, listen, if you leave and set up shop within 5 kilometers of this place within the next 5 years after you leave, you're going to pay a penalty. Okay? Are those enforceable? Are those legal?
Orange shirts. Oh, sorry.
Doesn't it depend on the density of the area you're working in?
It's pretty good. Pretty good. It depends. But I know you guys are gearing up for it depends is the answer for everything. Canadian courts, specifically the highest court in Ontario, over a decade ago, was faced with a situation where a dentist had hired an associate, and they had it was literally a napkin, and it basically said, 3 years, 5 kilometers, restrictive covenant, non-compete, sign, literally a napkin. Anyways, the associate leaves, the principal sues, this napkin goes into court before a judge, and the judge has to decide, is this enforceable? Is this legal? It sounds kind of unfair. It's written, it's in the contract, but couldn't there have been other mechanisms to protect the principal instead of having this really harsh non-compete? You guys just went to school for all those years, paid all that money. You can't practice your livelihood, dentistry? What do you guys think the court said? Court said a whole bunch of things, and you guys picked up on it. Number one, if you're going to try to include a non-compete in an associate agreement, and you want that to be legal and enforceable, especially in the context of an associate who just graduated, okay? First thing is you have to justify it. Why do you need this non-compete, Mr. or Mrs. Principal? Second thing is it has to be super reasonable. Okay? So nothing crazy in terms of time and distance. And then the court said, even with those two things, you know what, we're still not going to enforce this because there aren't exceptional circumstances that warrant it. You could just rely on a non-solicit. That could have done the job. And so we have yet to see a court, when faced with an associate agreement in Ontario recently, enforce a written non-compete. Now, David, does that mean that they're not going to be included in associate agreements?
It depends.
Depends on?
Who their lawyers are.
So, yes?
Would you provide like a remuneration, let's say, for getting money back? We were told recently that if you put in a non-compete and let's say another associate sets up shop, they have to pay a certain amount of fee to the principal dentist, let's say.
It's a penalty.
That hold up,
Are those types of penalties enforceable, David?
No, generally contract law states that you cannot have penalties. You can have estimated liquidated damages. You can try to estimate what a loss might be to you and try to quantify that in a contract. But penalties generally are not enforceable in a contract. And that gets back to what Michael was talking about, sort of your reasonableness, is it justified, etc. Question?
So you said is non-enforceable, but non-solicit reasonable?
Assuming there's a contract, right? And the contract is drafted clearly.
But just remember, there's not, especially in law, there's not a 100% hard and fast rule. There's always different cases, and there's judges who will look and interpret a specific set of facts before them, which is why the answer to every question at law is, it depends.
Right. So that's good news for you. And to answer my own question, you're still going to see these non-competes in your associate agreement, because if you end up leaving, setting shop across the street, the principal's going to get a lawyer, and they're going to threaten you, and you're going to get scared, and you may not want to spend the next 2 years and a whole whack of money trying to find out if this thing is enforceable or not. So that's why in these associate agreements, they're probably going to be there.
And again, having your correct team will help guide you and give you advice and protect you. So you heard from Michael, get educated, get protected, save money, make money. Sorry, question, blue shirt.
So then what would be like a reasonable non-solicited clause? Like someone would say like I can't call up and say, hey, I'm setting a shop across the street from me.
For an associate,
Yeah.
if you absolutely have to sign an associate agreement with a non-compete, you want something that's fair to you, which is like something that's staggered. Okay, so meaning if you've been there for a year, and if you leave after that 1 year, you shouldn't be hammered with like a 10-year, 10-kilometer non-compete. It should be reasonable and proportionate to the amount of time you've been there, the amount of time you spent with patients and team members. So something staggered would be a compromise.
The likelihood of an associate who's only at a principal's office for 3 to 6 months likely could not cause as much damage to that principal as a dentist who's an associate for 5 years, etc. and on.
Okay. No genuine pre-estimate of damages. So this gentleman asked about would you be forced to pay penalties? Penalties are illegal. Genuine pre-estimate of damages are not illegal, but you want to look for them in the contract, because it could basically say, if you violate this, you have to pay $100,000 as damages. And then you're like, well, we don't even know what the damages are. Why do I have to agree in advance? That's where the principal gets you, so be mindful of that. And if you agree to it in a contract, you're binding yourself in advance. So you don't want that. No chart fees, we talked about that. Right of first refusal, option to purchase, we talked about that. Can you negotiate? What do you guys think?
Oh, that guy was nodding his head.